Hey, history buffs, welcome back. But listen, before we start, I need you to do something. I need you to clear your schedule, get comfortable. I'm serious. This is gonna take a while. Fix your chair, grab water, coffee, whatever you need. Maybe turn off your phone. Because today we're not doing a quick overview. We're not skimming through this one. Today we're living through the entire Spanish Civil War, all 3 years of it, from the perspective of a single nationalist soldier. From the moment the uprising begins in July 1936 to the final victory parade in Madrid in 1939. This is one of the most complicated, brutal, and ideologically charged conflicts of the 20th century. It was a civil war, yes, but it was also a proxy war, a rehearsal for World War II, a religious crusade, a class struggle, and a human tragedy that killed 500,000 people and left scars on Spain that are still healing today. And you're going to experience it from the ground level, not from a general's headquarters, not from a historian's comfortable distance. You're going to feel the weight of a Mauser rifle in your hands. You're going to taste the dust of Castile. You're going to hear the whistle of incoming artillery. You're going to question whether you're fighting for God and Spain or just trying to survive one more day. This is not a simple story. There are no clean heroes, no easy answers. But by the end, you'll understand what it felt like to be there, to believe you were saving your country, even as you watched it tear itself apart. So settle in. This is going to be a long one. Let's go back to July 1936, to a Spain on the edge of the abyss. Part 1, The Uprising, July 1936. It begins with heat and rumor. You're 22 years old, and it's July 17, 1936. You're standing in the main plaza of Burgos, a city in Old Castile where the stones remember the medieval kings, and the cathedral spires pierce a sky that's turned the color of hammered brass in the afternoon sun. The heat is oppressive, the kind that makes the air shimmer and your linen shirt stick to your back. You've been working in your father's olive grove since dawn, and your hands are rough with calluses, your skin dark from years under this relentless Spanish sun. But today, everything feels different. Wrong. Electric. The radio in the cafe has been crackling with news all morning. Fragmentary reports, contradictory stories, something about a military uprising in Morocco, garrisons rebelling in Melilla, in Ceuta, officers declaring against the Republican government. You don't fully understand it yet. You're a farmhand, not a politician. Your world is olive trees and Mass on Sundays and the rhythm of planting and harvest. But then the church bells start ringing, not the normal rhythm of calling the faithful to Vespers. This is urgent, insistent. The sound makes your stomach clench. People are flooding into the plaza. Your father grips your arm, his fingers strong despite his 60 years. "Come," he says, "something's happening." The garrison commander stands on the steps of the town hall. He's a colonel, gray-haired, his uniform crisp despite the heat. His voice carries across the plaza, and you strain to hear. "Citizens of Burgos," he shouts. "The Spanish army has risen to save Spain from chaos, from communism, from the destruction of everything we hold sacred. The Republic has failed. It has allowed churches to burn, priests to be murdered, and anarchists to run wild in our streets. General Franco is leading the Army of Africa across from Morocco. Generals Mola, Capo de Llano, and others have declared for a national movement. We call upon all patriotic Spaniards to join us in restoring order, tradition, and faith to our beloved country." The crowd erupts. Some cheer, some look stunned. Some, you notice workers in caps, a few students, look angry, frightened. They melt away into the side streets. You wonder if they're Republicans, socialists. If they're going to fight against what's happening. Your father's hand tightens on your arm. "This is it," he says quietly. "The war we've all been afraid of. It's here." You feel cold despite the heat, because you've heard the stories. Everyone has. Stories about churches burned in Madrid, in Barcelona, convents ransacked, priests shot. The Republic elected in 1931 was supposed to modernize Spain, to bring it into the 20th century, but it fractured instead into a dozen competing factions: socialists, anarchists, communists, Republicans, regional separatists. And the right, the monarchists, the Catholics, the traditionalists, people like your father, they've watched with growing horror as the Spain they knew seemed to dissolve. 5 months ago, in February, the Popular Front, a coalition of left-wing parties, won the elections. barely, but they won. And since then, the violence has escalated. Political assassinations, street fights between phalangist youths and socialist militias, strikes, land seizures. The government seemed powerless to stop it, or unwilling. And now the army has risen, and you have to choose. Your priest appears in the plaza, Father Miguel, an old man with kind eyes who baptized you, who heard your first confession, who married your sister 3 years ago. He's talking to the colonel. Then he turns to the crowd. "My children," he says, and his voice trembles with emotion. "This is a holy crusade. The enemies of God have sought to destroy our church, our faith, our way of life. These men," he gestures to the soldiers, "are defending Christian civilization itself. Any Catholic man who can bear arms has a duty to fight, to protect Spain, to protect the faith. Your mother would want you to listen to Father Miguel. She's been terrified for months, praying her rosary every night, lighting candles to the Virgin. She's heard the stories too. A convent burned in Andalusia, nuns violated. Whether they're all true or not, she believes them, and so do you. Some of them anyway. Enough of them." The colonel announces that they're opening the armory. They need men, volunteers. The Republican government in Madrid will try to crush this uprising. They need soldiers to hold Burgos, to push south, to link up with Franco's forces when they cross from Africa. You look at your father. He's too old to fight. But he nods. "Go," he says. "Do your duty. For Spain. For God." You take a breath. You think about running, about hiding, about sitting this out. But where would you go? What would you tell your father? Your mother? Father Miguel? How would you live with yourself if the Republic won and the churches burned? So you go. You walk across the plaza, and you get in line with 200 other men. Young men, mostly. Farm boys like you. A few students from the university. Some phalangists in blue shirts who've been spoiling for this fight for years. A handful of veterans, old enough to have fought in Morocco in the Rif War against the tribes. They look grim and certain. They hand you a rifle. It's a Mauser Model 1893, long and heavy, the wood stock worn smooth by decades of use. It smells of gun oil and metal. They give you a leather cartridge pouch with 20 rounds of 7x57mm ammunition, a canteen, and a wool blanket that's scratchy and smells of mothballs. No uniform yet. Those will come later, maybe. For now, you tie a red beret, a boina roja, on your head. It's the symbol of the Carlist Requites, the traditionalist monarchist militias, though you're not technically a Carlist. You barely understand the difference between Carlists and Phalangists and Alphonsist monarchists. But the red beret marks you as nationalist, as anti-republic. That's all that matters right now. You sling the rifle over your shoulder. The weight surprises you. You've hunted rabbits with your father's old shotgun, but this is different. This is a weapon built to kill men at 300 meters. You try not to think about that. A sergeant, a scarred veteran with 3 fingers missing on his left hand, shows you how to load the rifle, how to open the bolt, how to press the stripper clip of 5 rounds into the internal magazine, how to close the bolt and chamber around, how to aim using the iron sights, how to squeeze the trigger, not jerk it. You'll learn the rest as you go, he says. His voice is matter of fact. Most of you will be dead or veterans in a month. The ones who learn fast are the ones who live. You swallow hard. That night, you sleep in the barracks courtyard on your scratchy blanket, the rifle next to your body. You can hear other men praying. Someone's crying quietly in the darkness. You stare up at the stars, the same stars you've watched your whole life from your father's farm, and you wonder what you've just done. You wonder if you'll ever see those olive groves again. Part 2, Becoming a Soldier, August 1936. The first week is chaos. There's no boot camp, no training regimen. You learn to be a soldier by doing, by watching the veterans, by making mistakes and hoping they're not fatal. You march out of Burgos 3 days after you enlisted, part of a column of 500 men heading south toward Madrid. The Republican government controls the capital, and the Nationalist strategy, as much as there is one, is to converge on Madrid from 3 directions. Franco's Army of Africa from the south, Mola's Army of the north, that's you, from the north, and other forces from the west. You march along dusty roads that cut through wheat fields already harvested, leaving behind stubble that crunches under your boots. They gave you proper boots 2 days ago, military issue, and they're stiff and heavy, and they're giving you blisters, but they're better than the rope-soled alpargatas you wore on the farm. You carry your rifle, your pack with ammunition and rations, and your blanket, your canteen sloshing with water that's always too warm. The sun is merciless. It's August in central Spain, and the heat radiates off the earth in shimmering waves. You sweat through your shirt. Your throat is always dry no matter how much you drink. The man next to you, a stocky guy named Paco from a village near yours, talks incessantly about his sweetheart Rosa, about how he's going to be a war hero, about how the Republic will collapse in weeks because God is on your side. You mostly listen. You're too tired to talk. You march 20 kilometers a day. Your feet blister, then the blisters pop, then they blister again. You learn to keep marching anyway. You learn that the veteran soldiers, men like Sergeant Ruiz, who fought the Rif tribes in Morocco, who was at Annual in 1921 when thousands of Spanish soldiers were massacred, they never complain. They just march. So you march too. At night, you camp in fields or in the courtyards of farms. The officers requisition food from the locals: bread, cheese, wine, sometimes a goat or chickens. Sometimes the locals give it willingly, crossing themselves and calling you Los Salvadores, the saviors. Mothers bring out their sons to join the column. Old men press wine bottles into soldiers' hands and talk about honor in Spain. But sometimes you see fear in their eyes, uncertainty. They give you the food because you have rifles, and they don't, because refusing would be dangerous. You try not to think about that. You eat bread so hard you have to soak it in wine to soften it enough to chew. You eat sardines from tins, their oil staining your fingers. You eat chickpeas cooked over open fires, bland and gritty with dust. You're always hungry. Your body is burning through calories faster than you can replace them. You sleep on the ground, the rifle next to you, your blanket pulled over you against the surprising cold of the nights. The temperature drops 30 degrees after sunset, and you wake up stiff and shivering, your muscles aching from the march and the hard ground. Sergeant Ruiz teaches you things your life depends on. How to dig a proper fighting position, deep enough to protect your torso, with a firing step cut into the forward wall. How to pile sandbags when you can find them, or fill empty grain sacks with dirt. How to camouflage your position with brush. How to move tactically, using cover, never skyline yourself on a ridge. How to estimate range. How to lead a moving target. The Republic has numbers, Ruiz says one evening as he's showing you how to field strip and clean your Mauser. His hands move with practiced efficiency, disassembling the bolt. They've got militias pouring out of Madrid and Barcelona, workers, idealists, but most of them have never held a rifle. He points the bolt at you. You're going to live because you'll learn faster than they do, because you'll listen to orders, because you'll dig in when I tell you to dig in. Understand? You nod. Good, he says. Because the first time you're under fire, you're going to piss yourself and forget everything I told you. Everyone does. But the second time, you'll remember, and by the 10th time you'll be a veteran, if you live that long. His bluntness is terrifying and somehow comforting. At least he's not lying to you. After 10 days of marching, you reach the mountains. The Sierra de Guadarrama, the range that separates old Castile from Madrid. The terrain changes. The roads climb into pine forests. The air is cooler, thinner. You're gasping for breath on the steep slopes, your legs burning, your pack straps digging into your shoulders. This is where the war finds you. You're bivouacked near the Puerto de Somosierra, a mountain pass, and you're told to dig in, to prepare defensive positions, because the Republicans are coming. You spend 2 days digging. The ground is rocky, and you break the handle of your entrenching tool on the first day. You borrow another. You dig until your hands bleed, until you have a trench deep enough to stand in with your head below ground level. You fill sandbags, actual sandbags this time, brought up by mule, and build a parapet. Other men are doing the same, creating a zigzag trench line across the forward slope of the ridge. Veterans show you how to construct a firing step, a little ledge cut into the forward wall of the trench so you can stand on it and shoot over the parapet without exposing too much of your body. How to dig sumps to drain rainwater. How to create traverse walls every few meters so an explosion in one section of trench won't kill everyone. You work alongside Paco and a quiet guy named Emilio, who was studying to be a priest before the war. Emilio prays constantly under his breath. The Rosary, the Pater Noster, sometimes just fragments, Santa Maria, Madre de Dios, over and over. It should be annoying, but somehow it's not. It's comforting, like he's praying for all of you. On the third day, the Republicans attack. You're in your trench at dawn, eating a breakfast of hard bread and sardines when you hear the whistle. Shrill, urgent, officers shouting, "A las armas! A las armas!" To arms. Your stomach drops. Your hands start shaking before you even know what's happening. You grab your rifle, check that it's loaded, 5 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, and scramble up onto the firing step. Paco is next to you, his face white. Emilio is crossing himself. At first, you see nothing. Just the slope dropping away into the valley, scrub brush and scattered pines, morning mist still clinging to the low ground. Then the mist shifts, and you see them. Men. Hundreds of them. A ragged line advancing up the slope toward your position. They're 200 meters away, maybe less. They're wearing mismatched uniforms, some in blue workers' overalls, some in brown militia uniforms, some in civilian clothes with just a red armband to mark them as Republican. Many are carrying rifles, some have only shotguns or hunting rifles. You see one man with a pitchfork. They're shouting. You can't make out the words, but the tone is clear. Defiance, anger, courage. Someone down the line opens fire, then everyone does. The sound is deafening. 30 rifles firing at once in a confined space. Your ears ring instantly. You raise your Mauser, trying to remember Ruiz's instructions. Pick a target, aim center mass, breathe, squeeze. You pull the trigger. The rifle bucks hard against your shoulder. You have no idea if you hit anything. You work the bolt, it's stiffer than you expected. You have to yank it, ejecting the spent brass casing. It arcs through the air, glinting in the sun, and lands at your feet. You shove the bolt forward, chambering another round. Aim. Fire. The rifle kicks again. You do this again and again. Bolt back. Bolt forward. Aim. Fire. Your shoulder is going to bruise from the recoil. Your hands are shaking so badly you can barely control the rifle. Sweat is pouring down your face, stinging your eyes. The Republicans are firing back. You hear the crack of bullets passing overhead, the snap as they break the sound barrier close to your ears. You hear the thud, thud, thud of rounds hitting the sandbag parapet in front of you, kicking up dust. Someone down the line screams. You don't look, you just keep loading and firing. Your magazine runs dry. You fumble with your cartridge pouch, pull out a stripper clip, drop it, curse, grab another one. Your hands are shaking too much. Paco is yelling something at you, but you can't hear over the ringing in your ears. You finally get the clip positioned over the magazine, press the rounds down with your thumb. They click into place. Close the bolt. Aim. Fire. The Republicans are closer now. 100 meters. You can see their faces. Young men. Boys. Like you. One of them is screaming a slogan, "No pasarán," they shall not pass, and you wonder if he's terrified too, if his hands are shaking like yours. Then the machine gun opens up. You didn't even know you had a machine gun. But somewhere to your right, a Hotchkiss gun starts firing. A slow, steady thump, 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 and you see the tracers arcing out toward the Republican line. You see men fall. You see the line waver, hesitate. An officer is blowing a whistle, shouting orders. The Republican line breaks. They're retreating, running back down the slope, some dragging wounded men, some just running. The firing stops. The sudden silence is almost as shocking as the noise was. You slump down into the trench, your legs giving out. You're shaking all over. Your shoulder aches. Your hands are black with powder residue. There's an empty brass casing in your boot, and you can feel it burning against your ankle, but you can't seem to make yourself move to remove it. Paco is sitting next to you. He's crying, not sobbing, just silent tears running down his cheeks, cutting tracks through the dust and powder residue on his face. Emilio is praying, "Dios te salve Maria, plena eres de gracia." Down the line, someone is screaming in pain. You force yourself to look. It's a young phalangist, maybe 19, clutching his stomach. Blood is seeping between his fingers. 2 men are dragging him back toward the aid station. You can see his intestines. You look away and vomit into the bottom of the trench. Sergeant Ruiz appears. He looks at you, at Paco, at Emilio. His face is expressionless. "Good," he says. "You didn't run. That's the first step. Get some water, check your ammunition, they'll be back. They come back 3 more times that day. By the 4th attack, you've stopped shaking. You load and fire mechanically. You don't think about the men you're shooting at. You just do what you're trained to do. Bolt back, bolt forward, aim, fire. By nightfall, when the attacks finally stop, you've fired 60 rounds. Your shoulder is one massive bruise. Your ears won't stop ringing. You've lost count of how many men you saw fall, on both sides. The phalangist with the stomach wound died an hour after he was hit. You heard him screaming for his mother until he didn't scream anymore. You sleep in the trench that night, too exhausted to move. You dream about faces, young men running up a hill, falling, getting back up, falling again. You wake up at dawn, stiff and cold and aching, and you realize you're still alive. And you realize with a sick clarity that you're going to have to do this again and again for as long as this war lasts. Part 3, The Long March, Autumn 1936. September brings cooler weather and a new rhythm. You're no longer a terrified farm boy. You're a soldier, not a good soldier maybe, but a living one, and in this war that counts for something. The Nationalist advance toward Madrid is slower than anyone expected. The Republic didn't collapse. They've organized militias, received arms from the Soviet Union, dug in. Every town, every village, every bridge is a battle. The war becomes a grinding, exhausting slog. You're issued a proper uniform now. A khaki tunic, wool breeches, puttees to wrap around your calves, and sturdy leather boots that actually fit. You're given a steel helmet, German-made, with a distinctive ridge down the center. It's heavy and uncomfortable, but after you see what a shell fragment does to a man's skull, you wear it without complaint. Your unit, you're part of a bandera, a battalion-strength formation, moves south through the mountains, then west toward Extremadura. You're trying to link up with Franco's forces advancing north from Seville. The Army of Africa, the elite Spanish Foreign Legion and Moroccan Regulares troops, they're the spearhead of the Nationalist advance. You've heard stories about them. How they're ruthless, how they give no quarter, how they terrify the Republicans. You meet them in early October near the town of Talavera de la Reina. They march into your bivouac at dusk, and you stop what you're doing, cleaning your rifle, and stare. These are not conscripts like you. These are professional soldiers. The legionnaires wear distinctive green uniforms and the shapiri, a stiff, flat-topped cap. Their faces are hard, weathered, scarred. Many have fought in Morocco for years. They move with absolute confidence, no wasted motion, checking their weapons and gear with practiced efficiency. The Moroccan troops are even more exotic to your provincial eyes. Dark-skinned men in turbans and jalabas, carrying long, curved knives in addition to their rifles. They speak Arabic among themselves. Their officers are Spanish, but the troops are North African colonial soldiers who have served Spain for decades in Morocco. They're Muslim, which makes some of the more devout Catholics in your unit uncomfortable. But they're on your side, and they're fearsome fighters. Sergeant Ruiz sees you watching them. Those men, he says quietly, have been fighting since most of you were in short pants. They don't take prisoners. They don't hesitate. If you're smart, you'll watch them and learn. You do watch, and you learn. You learn how they patrol, how they move through hostile terrain, how they attack with combined infantry and supporting fire. You learn that warfare is a craft, and they're masters of it. But you also see the aftermath of their attacks. Villages where every military-age male has been shot, Republican prisoners executed in ditches. The legionnaires and regulares don't believe in mercy. They believe in terror, in making the enemy so afraid that they won't fight. It works, sort of. But it also hardens Republican resistance in other places. Both sides are learning that this is a war without rules. You fight your way toward Madrid through October and November. Every village is the same. The Republicans have barricades in the streets. You attack, house to house, room to room. You learn to throw grenades through windows, to shoot at anything that moves, to never enter a room without covering fire. You see things that will haunt you forever. A pregnant woman caught in crossfire, bleeding out in a street while both sides are shooting, and no one can reach her. A Republican soldier, not much older than you, who surrenders and is immediately shot by a legionnaire officer. The boy is still holding his hands up when he falls. A church that the Republicans were using as a stronghold. After you take it, You find the bodies of 3 priests in the sacristy. They've been dead for weeks, probably killed when the Republicans took the town. Emilio cries when he sees them. He helps carry the bodies out for proper burial. A phalangist in your unit who gets drunk on looted wine and tries to assault a woman in her home. Sergeant Ruiz stops him, and the phalangist pulls a knife. Ruiz shoots him. No hesitation. No trial. "We're soldiers," Ruiz says to the shocked men watching, "not bandits." You're learning that war strips away everything civilized. What's left is just men trying to survive, to keep some shred of honor, to not become monsters. Some succeed, many don't. By November, you're on the outskirts of Madrid. You can see the city's buildings rising in the distance. This is it, everyone says. The Republic's capital. Once Madrid falls, the war is over. But Madrid doesn't fall. The Republicans, reinforced by Soviet arms and advisors, by the 1st International Brigade volunteers arriving from around the world, dig in and hold. The fighting around the Casa de Campo, the university city, is some of the most brutal you've experienced. Street fighting, building to building, floor to floor, room to room. You attack the philosophy building of the university on November 15th. It's a stone building, solid and defensible, that the Republicans have turned into a fortress. You advance across open ground under machine gun fire, and you watch men fall around you, some hit multiple times before they even know they're shot. You reach the building and crouch against the wall, breathing hard, your heart hammering. A Legionnaire officer throws a grenade through a window. You follow the explosion inside. The interior is chaos, smoke and dust, rubble. Republican defenders firing from behind, overturned desks and sandbag barricades. You fire your Mauser from the hip, working the bolt as fast as you can. A Republican militiaman charges at you with a bayonet. You parry with your rifle and shoot him in the chest. He falls at your feet. You take the ground floor. The Republicans pull back to the 2nd floor. You can hear them above you, moving furniture, preparing to defend the stairwell. This is going to be a slaughter. You spend 3 days fighting for that building. You gain a floor. You lose it in a counterattack. You gain it again. Men die in the same rooms, their bodies piling up until you're fighting around corpses. The smell is overwhelming. Blood, cordite, excrement, death. On the 3rd day, you're ordered to pull back, to consolidate. Madrid isn't going to fall. Not today, maybe never. You retreat to the outskirts and you dig in. The front line stabilizes. Madrid becomes a siege. Part 4, The Winter of Siege, December 1936 to March 1937. Winter in the trenches around Madrid is a special kind of hell. The temperature drops below freezing most nights. You have a blanket and your wool greatcoat, but they're never enough. You sleep curled into a ball in a dugout, a hole scraped into the side of the trench and covered with corrugated metal and sandbags, and you wake up stiff with cold, your breath misting in the air. The trenches are a maze now, stretching for kilometers around the city. Your sector faces the Casa de Campo across open ground that's been churned to mud by artillery and crisscrossed with barbed wire. No man's land. In some places, the Republican trenches are only 50 meters away. Close enough that you can hear them talking, close enough to throw grenades. The war has become a routine, a deadly, exhausting routine, but a routine nonetheless. Dawn stand to. Everyone in the trench with weapons ready, in case the Republicans attack at first light. They rarely do, but the ritual persists. Breakfast, cold rations usually, bread if you're lucky, sardines, wine or coffee brewed over a little spirit stove if your squad has one. Morning, maintenance. Clean your rifle, check your equipment, repair damage to the trench from overnight shelling, fill sandbags, string more barbed wire. Midday, the quietest time. Both sides avoid moving during daylight because snipers own no man's land. You huddle in your dugout and try to sleep or write letters home or play cards for cigarettes. Afternoon, stand to again as dusk approaches. Night, the active hours. Patrols into no man's land to check the wire, to probe enemy positions to snatch prisoners for interrogation. Listening posts out in shell craters, straining to hear the sound of enemy movement. Sometimes raids, small, violent attacks on enemy trenches designed to kill and terrorize, and then withdraw before the enemy can respond. You go on your first night patrol in December. Sergeant Ruiz leads. You, Paco, Emilio, and 2 other men. You blacken your faces with burnt cork. You leave your helmets behind, they make noise, and wear wool caps instead. You take your rifle, grenades, and your K-bar knife. Nothing else. No identification papers, in case you're captured. You go over the top at 0200 hours, lifting yourself out of the trench as quietly as you can. The night is cold and moonless, which is good. You need the darkness. You crawl on your belly through the mud, the barbed wire looming around you like skeletal fingers. Your hands are freezing. Every sound, the scrape of your belt buckle on a rock, the clink of your rifle sling, seems impossibly loud. You reach a shell crater 15 meters out and slide into it. Water at the bottom, icy and foul-smelling. You crouch there, listening. Ruiz gestures, keep moving. You're halfway across no man's land when you hear voices. Spanish, Republican sentries talking quietly. You freeze, your heart hammering so loud you're sure they can hear it. Ruiz gestures down. You press yourself flat in the mud. The voices move away. After an eternity, Ruiz signals, move. You complete the patrol, checking the barbed wire, noting a gap that the Republicans might use, and make it back to your own lines just before dawn. You're covered in mud, freezing, exhausted, but you're alive. Ruiz nods approval. Good, he says. You didn't panic. You realize you're becoming a veteran. The thought doesn't comfort you. Christmas comes. Father Miguel, who's still with your unit, says Mass in a dugout. You crowd in with 50 other men, packed shoulder to shoulder, and you take communion. The wafer tastes of nothing, but the wine burns warmth down your throat. You pray for peace, for your family, for the war to end. It doesn't. In January, the Republic launches an offensive at Jarama, southeast of Madrid, trying to cut the main road to Valencia. Your unit is rushed south to reinforce. The battle lasts 3 weeks and costs thousands of lives on both sides. You fight in freezing rain that turns the ground to a quagmire. You see your first Soviet tanks, T-26s, small and fast, with riveted armor and 45mm guns. They're terrifying until you see a Nationalist anti-tank gun blow one apart. The turret flies 20 meters. You see your first international brigades, too. Foreign volunteers fighting for the Republic. You capture a wounded man from the British battalion. He's from London, a factory worker, a communist who came to Spain to fight fascism. He's your age. You wonder what he thought he was fighting for, what he thought you were fighting for. A Legionnaire officer wants to shoot him. Ruiz intervenes. He's a prisoner, Ruiz says flatly. The rules still apply. The officer sneers but backs down. The Englishman is taken to a prisoner camp. You never learn what happens to him. Jarama ends in stalemate. Both sides claim victory. Both sides are bleeding. By March, you're back in the trenches around Madrid. You've been a soldier for 8 months now. You've fought in a dozen battles. You've killed men. You've lost count of how many. You've seen friends die. Paco was hit by a mortar fragment at Jarama, a piece of shrapnel the size of your thumb that punched through his lung. He drowned in his own blood before the stretcher bearers could reach him. You held his hand while he died. He tried to say something, Rosa's name maybe, but only blood came out. You don't cry anymore. You're too tired to cry. You're also starting to question things you never questioned before. You believe you're fighting for Spain, for the church, for order and tradition. You still believe that. But you've also seen what that fight costs. You've seen villages destroyed, civilians caught in the crossfire, prisoners executed, soldiers on both sides driven to atrocities by exhaustion and fear and propaganda. You've heard the Republican radio broadcasts when the wind is right. They call you fascists. They say you're fighting for landlords and generals and foreign dictators, Hitler and Mussolini. They say the people of Spain don't want you. But you've also heard what happens in Republican zones, the summary executions, the political purges, anarchists and communists fighting each other in Barcelona while supposedly on the same side. The chaos. Maybe there are no good sides. Maybe there are just men with rifles, told to kill other men with rifles, for reasons that made sense once but now seem increasingly distant and abstract. You keep fighting because stopping means all of it. Paco's death, the philosophy building, the night patrols, the cold and the fear and the exhaustion, was for nothing. You keep fighting because the men next to you depend on you. Because going home means admitting defeat. You keep fighting because you don't know what else to do. Part 5. The Grind of 1937, Spring to Winter. Spring brings green back to the hills around Madrid, and with it, renewed offensives. The Republic is still trying to break the siege. The Nationalists are trying to expand their control of northern Spain to capture the Basque Country and Asturias, the Republican-held regions on the north coast. Your unit is sent north in April. The Basque campaign is different from Madrid. The terrain is green and mountainous. The people speak a language you don't understand, Euskara, and they're fiercely loyal to the Republic, or at least to Basque autonomy. Every village is defended. The Gudaris, the Basque militia, are tough fighters, defending their homeland with desperate courage. You participate in the siege of Bilbao. The city is protected by the Iron Ring, a belt of fortifications and bunkers surrounding it. German Condor Legion bombers, Junkers Ju-52s and the new He-111s, pound the fortifications day after day. You watch them fly overhead, swastikas on their tails, and you feel a complicated mixture of gratitude and unease. They're helping you win, but this is supposed to be a Spanish war. Now there are Germans bombing Spanish cities, Italians sending tanks, Soviets arming the Republicans. On April 26th, you hear about Guernica, a Basque market town bombed by the Condor Legion. Reports are confused, contradictory. The Republicans say it was a deliberate terror bombing, that hundreds of civilians were killed. Your officers say it was a military target, that the casualty reports are exaggerated propaganda. You don't know what to believe. You weren't there. But you've seen what bombers can do. And you remember Ruiz's words, "This war is making monsters of all of us." Bilbao falls in June. The Iron Ring is breached. The city surrenders. You march through streets where women watch you with hate in their eyes, where children throw stones until your officers threaten to shoot. You're conquerors, not liberators. At least not here. Summer brings a new offensive, but this time by the Republicans. They attack at Brunet, west of Madrid, trying to encircle the Nationalist forces besieging the capital. Your unit is rushed back south. The Battle of Brunet in July is hell. The temperature is over 40 degrees Celsius, over 100 Fahrenheit. The heat is like a physical weight crushing you. You fight in wheat fields turned to dust, in villages reduced to rubble, under a sun that beats down mercilessly. Men die of heat stroke as often as bullets. You drink liters of water and still feel dehydrated. Your lips crack and bleed. Your skin burns. The Republicans have massed tanks and aircraft for this offensive. Soviet T-26s and BT-5s, I-15 and I-16 fighters. The newer I-16 Mosca fighters are fast and deadly, and they strafe your positions with machine guns, forcing you to dive for cover, eating dirt. But the Nationalists bring in the Condor Legion's new Bf-109 fighters. You watch the dogfights overhead, seeing Soviet and German aircraft dueling in the Spanish sky, and you realize this isn't Spain's war anymore. This is a proxy war, a testing ground, a rehearsal for something bigger that everyone can feel coming, but no one wants to name. The battle lasts 3 weeks. The Republican offensive gains ground, then you counterattack and take it back. Thousands die for a few kilometers of scorched earth. You fight in a village called Villanueva de la Cañada, going house to house, room to room, in temperatures hot enough to make your rifle barrel painful to touch. You see a Republican soldier collapse from heat stroke in the middle of a firefight, dropping his rifle and simply crumpling. You shoot him anyway. You can't afford to assume. By the end of July, Brunet is a Nationalist victory. Technically. Both sides are exhausted. You've lost a third of your battalion. Your regiment has ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. You're pulled back to rest and refit. You spend August in a quiet sector, and you try to recover. You're 23 years old now. You feel 50. Autumn brings more grinding battles. The Republicans attack at Belchite in Aragon. The fighting in that town lasts 2 weeks, house to house, and when it finally falls to the Republicans, the town has been completely destroyed. Every building shattered. You see photographs. It looks like the surface of the moon. Then the Nationalists counterattack and take Asturias in the north, ending Republican resistance on the northern coast. The north is secure. Franco's forces can now concentrate on the east, on Catalonia and the Mediterranean coast. Winter comes again. Your second winter of the war. You're in Aragon now, preparing for an offensive toward the sea, toward splitting Republican territory in two. You've been issued a new rifle, a Mauser 98K, German supplied, newer and slightly shorter than your old 1893 model. You've also received a proper field jacket and better boots. The Nationalist logistics are improving. German and Italian aid is pouring in. You're becoming a well-equipped army, but you're also tired, bone-tired, soul-tired. Emilio was killed at Brunete. A shell landed in his dugout while he was sleeping. There wasn't enough left to bury properly. You said prayers over a shallow grave with his rosary on top. You've received 3 letters from home in 18 months. Your mother writes that your father's health is failing, that they miss you, that they pray for you every night. She doesn't understand why the war is taking so long. She thought it would be over by now. So did you. You write back, but you can't tell her what you've seen, what you've done, how you've changed. You write bland reassurances about your health, about your faith, about how you're doing your duty. You don't tell her about the nightmares, about how you sometimes wake up reaching for your rifle, convinced Republicans are in the trench, about how you can't remember what peace feels like. Christmas 1937. Father Miguel says Mass again. There are half as many men as last year. Some dead, some wounded and evacuated, some simply gone, deserted probably, though no one talks about it. You pray for the war to end, but you don't believe it will. Not soon. Maybe not ever. Maybe this is just your life now. Maybe you'll die in these trenches, forgotten, just another casualty of a war that will be a footnote in history books, if anyone remembers it at all. Spring 1938 brings the Aragon offensive. The Nationalists, with overwhelming superiority in artillery and aircraft, smash through Republican lines and drive toward the Mediterranean. You're part of the offensive, advancing rapidly through Aragon toward Catalonia. For the first time in the war, you're winning decisively. You advance 50 kilometers in a week, 100 kilometers in a month. Towns and cities fall with surprising speed. Belchite, retaken, Caspe, Alcañiz. The Republicans are retreating, sometimes fighting, sometimes just fleeing. You capture stockpiles of Soviet weapons, thousands of prisoners, entire Republican units that surrender rather than face encirclement. On April 15, 1938, you reach the Mediterranean Sea at Vinaròs. You stand on a beach, your boots in the sand, the sea stretching to the horizon, and you realize you've just cut Republican Spain in two. Catalonia in the north is now isolated from the central and southern Republican zones. This is a turning point. Everyone can feel it. There's a victory celebration, wine distributed to the troops, officers making speeches about how the war will be over by summer. Franco himself visits the front, and you see him from a distance. A short, stocky man with a high voice and cold eyes. He doesn't look like a warrior. He looks like a bureaucrat. But he's winning. You're too exhausted to celebrate. You drink the wine. You sleep for 14 hours straight. You wake up and realize you're still alive, still fighting, and the war isn't over. Not yet. Summer brings the Battle of the Ebro. The Republic, desperate to reconnect their divided territories, launches a massive counteroffensive across the Ebro River in Catalonia. On the night of July 24th, 25th, Republican forces cross the river on boats and pontoon bridges, achieving complete surprise and smash into your sector. You wake up to chaos, artillery falling, machine gun fire, screams. The Republicans have broken through the forward lines and are advancing rapidly. You grab your rifle and scramble out of your dugout, still half asleep, trying to understand what's happening. Your sector is being overrun. You fall back, fighting a running battle through the darkness, shooting at muzzle flashes, stumbling over rocks and through scrub brush. You lose contact with your unit. For hours you're alone, hiding in a gully, listening to Republican soldiers moving past you in the darkness, their Spanish accents different from yours. Catalan? Madrileño? You can't tell. At dawn, you find other stragglers from your battalion. A sergeant you don't know takes charge. You form a makeshift defensive line and hold. The Republican advance stalls. Reinforcements arrive. Artillery and aircraft are rushed to the sector. The battle lasts for 4 months. 4 months of the most intense combat of the war. The Republicans establish a bridgehead across the Ebro, and the Nationalists throw everything at it to push them back. Artillery duels that shake the earth. Air battles overhead, dozens of planes twisting and burning. Infantry attacks and counterattacks, back and forth over the same hills, the same villages, the same trenches. You fight through July, through August, through September. The heat is brutal. Then autumn rains turn everything to mud. You fight in conditions that make the trenches around Madrid seem comfortable. You fight over ground that's been fought over 10 times already, where you trip over corpses from previous battles, where the stench of death is inescapable. You're hit in September. A shell lands close, too close, and you're thrown through the air like a rag doll. You land hard, the wind knocked out of you, ears ringing, vision blurred. You try to stand and realize your left leg won't support your weight. You look down and see blood. A lot of blood. A shell fragment has carved a furrow through your thigh, not deep enough to hit the bone or artery, but bad enough. Hands grab you, drag you back. You're dimly aware of being carried, of pain, of voices shouting. Then morphine, blessed morphine, and everything goes soft and distant. You wake up in a field hospital. A tent city behind the lines, surgeons working around the clock on hundreds of wounded. A doctor examines your leg, declares you lucky. The wound is clean, no major damage, you'll recover. They stitch you up, dose you with sulfa drugs to prevent infection, and tell you you'll be back at the front in 6 weeks. You spend those 6 weeks in a convalescent hospital in Zaragoza. Clean sheets, real food, relative safety. It feels like paradise. It feels like betrayal. Your comrades are still fighting and dying while you're sleeping in a real bed. You also have time to think. Too much time. And you realize you don't know why you're fighting anymore. You started this war believing you were saving Spain from chaos and godlessness. Maybe that was true once, maybe it still is. But you've also seen what victory looks like. The executions, the reprisals, the fear in conquered territories. Franco is creating a Spain of silence and submission. Is that what you fought for? But what's the alternative? The Republic is backed by Stalin's USSR, by communists and anarchists who burned churches and shot priests, who executed landowners and businessmen just for being class enemies, who've turned their own territories into killing fields of political purges. There are no good options, only bad ones and worse ones. You're not a philosopher, you're not a political theorist, you're just a farmer from Castile who picked up a rifle because his priest told him it was his duty. And now you've killed dozens of men, watched friends die, nearly died yourself, and you're not sure it mattered. Not sure it changed anything except to ensure that Spain will be ruled by one set of authoritarians instead of another. But you can't stop. Desertion means execution. And even if you could run, where would you go? The Republic would shoot you as a fascist. Foreign countries won't take Spanish refugees unless they have money or connections, which you don't. Your only option is to keep fighting and hope you live long enough to see the end. So when your leg heals, you go back. By November, the Battle of the Ebro is over. The Republicans have been pushed back across the river. They've lost 30,000 casualties. Their army is shattered. The Nationalists have won. But it cost you 20,000 casualties too. Your battalion is down to half strength. The men who remain are hollow-eyed and silent. You've all seen too much. Winter comes. The war moves into Catalonia. Barcelona, the Republic's last major city, is the target. Part 7. Endgame. Winter and Spring 1939. The Catalonia offensive begins on December 23, 1938. A Christmas present for Franco. The Nationalists advance with overwhelming force. Aircraft, artillery, tanks, and fresh troops. The Republic, exhausted and demoralized after the Ebro, can't hold. You cross into Catalonia in January 1939. The advance is rapid. Towns fall daily. The Republican army is disintegrating, soldiers throwing down their weapons and fleeing toward the French border. Refugees clog the roads, civilians fleeing the Nationalist advance, terrified of reprisals. Whole families with carts loaded with possessions, children crying, old people struggling to keep up. The winter is cold and wet, and you see them huddled in ditches, freezing, starving. You're ordered not to interfere with refugees. Just disarm any soldiers and send them to prisoner collection points. Let the civilians go. Most do. But you also see units, legionnaires, regulaires, some phalangist militias, who treat the refugees as enemies, who rob them, who shoot military-age men on suspicion of being Republican soldiers. You look away. You've learned that protesting accomplishes nothing except to make you a target. On January 26, 1939, you enter Barcelona. The city is vast and chaotic. Buildings scarred by bombs and shells, barricades abandoned, Republican flags torn down or burned. The people watch you pass with fear and hatred. No one throws flowers, no one cheers. They know what comes next. You're quartered in a requisitioned apartment in the Eixample district. The family who lived here has fled. You sleep in their bed, you eat from their dishes. You try not to think about where they are now, hiding in the city, fled to France, dead. The retributions begin almost immediately. Lists of Republicans, union leaders, Catalan nationalists, anyone who supported the Republic. Arrests, trials that aren't really trials, executions. You hear the rifle volleys at dawn from the Montjuic fortress. Every morning, dozens at a time. You don't participate. Your unit is assigned occupation duty, maintaining order, confiscating weapons. But you see the aftermath. You see the fear. You see families whose fathers or brothers have disappeared. You see the Spain that Franco is building. A Spain of order, yes, but also of terror, of vengeance. Is this what you fought for? You don't know anymore. February and March bring the final collapse of the Republic. Catalonia falls completely. Nearly 500,000 refugees, soldiers and civilians, flee across the border into France, where they're interned in camps on the beaches, living in terrible conditions. You hear stories. You try not to imagine what it's like. In Madrid and the Central Zone, the Republic is disintegrating from within. Communists and anti-communists are fighting each other. There's a coup against the Republican government, an attempt to negotiate peace. It fails. On March 28, 1939, nationalist forces enter Madrid. The city that held for nearly 3 years, that you assaulted in 1936 and failed to take, surrenders without a fight. The war is over. You hear the news in Barcelona. There's celebration. Officers distribute wine. Men fire their rifles in the air. There's talk of a victory parade, of going home, of rebuilding Spain. You drink the wine. You don't celebrate. You just feel tired. April 1st, 1939 is declared Victory Day. Franco gives a speech. La guerra ha terminado. The war is over. The nationalists have won. Spain is unified under his rule. He promises peace, order, stability. You're ordered to Madrid for the victory parade. Hundreds of thousands of nationalist troops marching through the capital. Aircraft flying overhead. Crowds, real or coerced, you can't tell, cheering. You march in formation down the Gran Via, rifle on your shoulder, the same Mauser 98K you carried through Aragon and Catalonia and the Ebro. You're wearing your dress uniform, cleaned and pressed for the first time in months. You look like a proper soldier, a hero. You feel like a ghost. You pass the Philosophy Building, the building you fought for in 1936. It's still standing somehow, though scarred with bullet holes and shell damage. You remember the smell of cordite and blood. You remember the Republican militiaman you shot on the ground floor. You wonder if his family knows he's dead. You wonder if anyone remembers him. Franco himself takes the salute from a reviewing stand. You march past him. He looks small and tired and victorious. He's won. Spain is his, and it will be his for the next 36 years, until he dies in bed in 1975. You've won. But what have you won? A Spain of silence, of censorship, of political prisoners and mass graves. A Spain where half the population is defeated and traumatized, and the other half is exhausted and disillusioned. A Spain that will take decades to heal, if it ever does. After the parade, you're demobilized, just like that. 3 years of war, and it's over. They give you a small bonus, back pay technically, though it's not much, a certificate of service, and a train ticket home. You ride the train north to Burgos, then take a bus to your village. You're wearing your uniform. People stare at you. Some nod respect. Some look away. You walk the last kilometer to your family's farm. It's spring, and the olive groves are blooming. The same trees you worked under before the war. They haven't changed. Everything else has. Your mother sees you first. She screams and runs to you, and you're enveloped in her embrace. She's crying, thanking God, touching your face like she can't believe you're real. Your father comes out, slower, leaning on a cane. His health has failed, just as your mother wrote. He shakes your hand, then pulls you into a rough embrace. He's crying too. They take you inside. They feed you. Real food, your mother's cooking, things you haven't tasted in 3 years. Bread and olive oil and roasted lamb and wine from your father's own vines. It tastes like heaven. It tastes like ashes. They ask you about the war, what you saw, what you did. You tell them the barest minimum, that you fought, that you survived, that you did your duty. You don't tell them about Paco bleeding out in your arms at Jarama. You don't tell them about the executions you witnessed. You don't tell them about the nightmares that wake you every night. Your mother says you're a hero, that you saved Spain, that God protected you for a reason. You nod and say nothing. You try to return to your old life. You work in the olive groves. You go to Mass on Sundays. Father Miguel is still there, older and grayer, and he welcomes you back. He praises you in his sermon, calling you one of the heroes of the crusade. You sit in the pew and feel like a fraud. You see other veterans in the village, men you grew up with who also went to war. You don't talk about it much. What is there to say? You all know what you saw, what you did, the weight you carry. Some men adjust. They get married, have children, rebuild their lives. Some men drink to forget. Some men turn bitter and angry, joining Falangist veterans organizations, clinging to the ideology that justified the war. Some men just disappear one day, desertion into civilian life, or suicide, you never know which. You adjust eventually. You marry a local girl, Elena, in 1941. She's kind and patient, and she doesn't ask about the war. You have children, 3 of them, over the next decade. You work the farm, you provide for your family, you go through the motions of life. But part of you is still in the trenches. Part of you is still standing in that philosophy building, shooting a man who's just like you, who was born in the wrong place at the wrong time and picked the wrong side. Part of you is still marching through Barcelona, watching the firing squads work. Spain rebuilds. Franco's regime settles into a kind of stifling normalcy. The repression continues, political prisoners, censorship, a police state, but it's quiet, efficient. People learn not to ask questions, not to remember the wrong things, not to talk about the war. The war becomes the crusade in official history, a righteous struggle against communism. The nationalist dead are heroes. The Republican dead are barely mentioned, buried in unmarked graves, forgotten. It's as if half the country never existed. You live with the silence. You live with the memories. You live with the knowledge that you fought for 3 years, killed men, nearly died, and helped create a Spain that's safe and orderly and dead inside. You live with it because you have no choice. Decades later, when you're old and your children are grown, Spain changes. Franco dies in 1975. Democracy returns. There's a transition, a pact of forgetting, El Pacto del Olvido, where the country agrees not to dwell on the past, not to assign blame, just to move forward. But some people want to remember. There's a movement to exhume mass graves, to identify the dead, to acknowledge what happened. Your children ask you about the war. Your grandchildren, who've only known democratic Spain, who can't imagine what it was like, they ask. And you finally talk. Not everything. You can't tell them everything, but you tell them enough. You tell them what war is really like. Not heroic, not glorious, just terrible. You tell them that you fought because you believed it was right, or at least necessary, but that looking back, you're not sure it was worth it. That maybe there were no good sides. Just men with rifles killing each other over ideas that seemed important at the time, but now seem distant and abstract. You tell them that Spain lost something in that war that it's never fully recovered. A sense of unity, of shared purpose. That the country is still divided, still scarred, even if the wounds are hidden. You tell them to never let it happen again. And then you die, and you're buried in the village cemetery, and there's a small headstone with your name and the dates of your life. It doesn't mention the war. It doesn't need to. Spain remembers, in its own way, in its own time. And maybe that's enough. That's it. That's the view from the boots of a nationalist soldier in the Spanish Civil War. A war that was never as simple as crusade versus communism, faith versus atheism, order versus chaos. It was Spaniards killing Spaniards over a vision of Spain that neither side fully understood, backed by foreign powers using Spain as a testing ground for a bigger war to come. It was 3 years of blood and mud and exhaustion and fear. 3 years that killed 500,000 people and traumatized a nation for generations. 3 years that shaped modern Spain in ways that are still being reckoned with today. And for the individual soldier, for you in this story, it was a journey from idealistic farm boy to traumatized veteran, from certainty to doubt, from hope to exhaustion. A journey that hundreds of thousands of men on both sides made. A journey that left scars that never fully healed. Thank you for walking through it with me. I know this was long, I know it was heavy, but this is what history feels like when you're living it. When it's not dates and maps, but mud and fear and the weight of a rifle and the faces of men you killed. Take care of yourselves, remember the cost of war, and I'll see you in the next one.